And now we have Professor Bonatan, who truly knows the history of physics and the science in Singapore. And you may not know Professor Bonatan, apart from being a physicist. He's an accomplished musician, and he had been involved in the Singapore Symphony Orchestra for many years. And my collection of Bernard is when I joined the NUS, he was the Dean of Faculty of Science, and so I didn't really get a lot of interaction with him. But what we look forward is our annual dinner, and Bernard will come and talk about all the past history, all the very, very interesting stories, and he's a brilliant speaker. And he truly witnessed the science development in Singapore, and he played a lot of leadership roles in a lot of the initiatives. So let's welcome Professor Bonatan.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Well, after this introduction, you may think I'm 100 years old, but I'm not quite yet. In fact, I'm slightly younger than KK, who is just turned 18. Okay. That sort of sets the stage for me to talk about physics and science in Singapore a little bit earlier than the time frames which Bilal and Choi Heng mentioned. Okay, I'm an old guy, always talking about the past now. Okay, but I think it is important for us to know the context in which physics flowered in Singapore. See, now I've titled my talk "A Life of Service to Physics" because that's exactly what K.K. Phua's life exemplifies. It's a life of service to physics, but in so many ways. But I'm going to show that his life of service also extended way beyond physics. So I won't talk about many of the things which other speakers have talked about before, but I'll try to talk about things which I have worked together with KK, had the privilege of working together with him, and which took his experience and influence way beyond physics. Okay, let's set the stage. Oh, I even go back to 1929. I assure you I was not born in 1929, it's later than that. But I have to go back there because I could even go back to 1905 actually. But 1929 is the birth of the physics department in Raffles College, which was the first college of higher education awarding degrees in Singapore. The founding of NUS actually dates back to 1905, which is why NUS celebrated its centenary in 2005. 1905, if you want to know, was actually the founding of the medical school in Singapore. But physics dates back to 29. Okay. Now, jump to 20 years just after the war, and the colleges I was mentioning, Raffles College and the College of Medicine, merged to form the University of Malaya. Now, at the time it was called the University of Malaya simply because Singapore was still a crown colony and part of Malaya, geographically and politically. Now, the campus of the University of Malaya was at only one place, the Bukit Timah campus, which of course exists today, and which I'm glad to say that NUS has returned to. Okay? It's a campus which my generation studied in. It's a very graceful, very Very nice campus. If those of you have never been to Bukit Timah campus, it's worth a trip to see that campus because it's a campus that means a lot to us. The buildings are really solid because in those days civil engineers, I don't know, because they couldn't do the calculations, they will make everything triply thick just to make sure the building doesn't collapse. Now, 1955, a very important incident. The birth of NANTA, Nanyang University, okay? Which, of course, heralded the birth of NANTA's physics department in 1955. Okay. In 1962, with Singapore's self-government, the campus at Bukit Timah became the University of Singapore. In fact, the current University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur is historically the same as this. What happened was that with the formation of Malaysia's independence, the University of Malaya split into two campuses. And then by 1962, the campus in Singapore was renamed University of Singapore because of our self-government, okay? And then finally, as my prior speakers have mentioned, 1980, the formation of NUS, National University of Singapore, and the two physics departments at both campuses merged into one department. And that's, of course, when, as was mentioned before, KK became my colleague, actually. Okay. I just also want to mention that, as I was talking to KK earlier, I mention all these things because I think it's good for the younger physicists and scientists here to know the context in which we operate today. Now, I've left out a lot of things. In particular, I left out the fact that from here to here were very difficult years for everybody. In fact, I would say there were years of turmoil, okay? And I would say that the merger of the two universities into NUS was an event which was tumultuous. And I think the reverberations of that event are still not done today. Okay? Anyway, in the science faculty, everything was actually very good because the scientists, as opposed to the humanities people, the scientists of both universities knew each other very well. I'm going to talk about that later. And in fact, the NANTA dean, a person who I revere and miss very much, Prof Phua, became the dean of the NUS Science Faculty, which was a very good move because it cemented the fact that we recognized that the NANTA scientists were also well-renowned and as good as the NUS scientists. Here I focus a little bit closer on the two departments. That's the logo of NANTA, logo of University of Singapore. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the two physics departments, even pre-merger in the early 70s, interacted with each other very well. We respected each other as peers. There was no problem about that, okay? I have to be honest and say that this was not necessarily true for the other disciplines within both universities, okay? Now, something which I want to mention, both departments, because of the fact that the staff were very well qualified, and published a lot and gone to universities of international renown. Therefore, the respect was very mutual, okay? And then I want to mention something which some people not really noticed, you know. Both departments on either side were headed by, I don't know, it's a coincidence or what, both headed by spectroscopists, okay? Prof Chun Chen Piao was, by the time when he joined NANTA, he was already internationally renowned as spectroscopist, okay? But on the University of Singapore side, my boss, Prof Rajaratnam, was also a spectroscopist. And he always spoke to me with great respect for Prof Cho. He always told me he's a very distinguished spectroscopist. So he was trained at Imperial College. And of course, in 1980, as mentioned, the two departments merged with NUS being formed in 1980. Okay. Actually, many of you know Prof Phua's career, okay? Except that I just changed this slide a few minutes ago because, like many of us, we always assumed that he had done his undergraduate physics at Nanta. Now I know it's not the case. He did his undergraduate at HKU, which at the time was a very difficult university to enter, you know? Even today, they regard themselves as a highly superior university, which may be true in some respects. Okay, then I asked him a very silly question. Why did you go to Hong Kong to study? Those of you who know about Doreen will know that's a very silly question, okay? But anyway, the other things he told me which are quite interesting. Then of course, he went to do his PhD in high energy physics at Birmingham, postdoc at Niels Ball. In fact, I was going to say that his physics training and my training coincided. We did our undergraduate degrees roughly the same time. We did our PhDs roughly the same time. He came back a little later than me because he did his postdoc at Niels Ball and joined the faculty of Nanta's physics department in 71. And of course, in 1980, he became my colleague in the NUS physics department. Now, I want to mention the Institute of Physics Singapore, which many of you know, because it is a symbol of the close collaboration between University of Singapore and Nanta before NUS. This was founded in the early 70s. I was trying to look at the exact date. I think it's 1972, but I can't be sure. It's around there, okay? And this is now, of course, the national body of physicists in Singapore, jointly founded by staff of both universities, and KK Phua, of course, as you might expect, was strongly active in its founding. Okay. Now, the fact that the staff of the two universities would come together and form IPS shows you how close they were. They always regarded each other as colleagues. So to form the national body IPS was a natural thing for them to do. Now, I just want to mention also that World Scientific has donated the IPS Medal and Prize for Outstanding Physics Research. And of course, KK was awarded the IPS President's Medal, its highest award, for its distinguished contributions to physics in Singapore and internationally. So his connections of IPS are still very strong. Okay. Now, a lot of talks about KK's area. I've talked about many conferences he did, like Asia Pacific Physics Conference and all, but I found within my papers, amazingly, I still had the papers for the very first physics symposium held by IPS. This was held in 1976. I don't know whether KK, you remember this. This is the very first National Symposium of Physics in Singapore, the very first one, 1976. And of course, KK Phua is very strongly involved in this, invites C.N. Young to give guest lectures. And as we'll see later, KK himself, I'm sure you've forgotten this, he presented 3 papers at the conference. I have proof of this. And of course, this set the stage for Frontiers of Physics, 1978. The first international conference on physics in Singapore. Needless to say, the driving force behind this was KK Phua, okay? And this was held with IPS being the lead organization, but held under a bigger umbrella, Singapore National Academy of Science, okay? And many of the overseas physicists were actually personally invited by him. And the conference proceedings, which I know I have somewhere, but I spent 1 week, I can't find my copy. It's somewhere around. The 2 volumes were published by SNAS. But I did find, amazingly, some of the documents relating to the first symposium. I actually have the program card, okay? And that's our logo, okay? And I found the printed program and all that sort of thing. And I mentioned that he presented 3 papers. Here is the proof, documentary proof. Here are the 4 pages of the conference symposium. I don't know, KK, you can remember all this stuff. one paper here. Here you have Phua, here Kok Phua, and here Phua Kok Khoo. So it could be 3 different people, I don't know. But I think it's you lah. So 3 papers, all different names. Very strange, but I found, so this is proof that he was extremely active in research at the time, okay? And some of you here may remember this conference and may have even presented papers at this conference. Okay. Right. Now, other speakers will have talked about the physics activities of KK, but I want to talk about 3 activities which I personally participated with KK, which slightly outside the boundaries of physics. The first one that I want to talk about is something that is still ongoing today, the Tan Kah Kee Young Inventors Award. Of course, this is done by the Tan Kah Kee Foundation, which is still active today, and I think this is still going on till today, the Young Inventors Award, okay? And it's always jointly administered by the foundation with the MOE Singapore, so it's recognized at the highest levels. Interestingly enough, this was initiated on the suggestion of Yang Chen Ning, actually. He suggested he could see, I think you remember, he said that we must find some way of encouraging innovation. And one way was to start a contest for inventors, which involves innovation and inventiveness. And the founding chairman of this Inventors Award is none other than K.K. Phua. He was the chairman for many years, because I was involved in the judging panel for many years at your invitation. Okay. I just dug up some papers and to find out who were the past winners. This is the winner of the open section in the very first one. He's still active today. He's a data guy, okay? And I remember that you sent the outstanding winners to this Japan competition, and they all did very well. This guy, Clifford, he won the grand prize in Japan. Cha Tat-Fat is a plant pathologist who's still active, winner of the Open Award. And I haven't kept up with this, but at the time I remember there were only 2 gold awards ever awarded for open section, okay? One is by Susan, a friend of mine, who got an award for audio compression algorithm. And in fact, parts of that algorithm were incorporated into the standards which we have today in MP3 and all that, okay? And then the other gold award, Lim Sun Wong, a genius in database theory, and he was very, very young when he won it. So I think they're both active in academia today. So this is just to show that the Tan Kah Kee Young Inventors Award is not just a competition in Singapore. It has had big impacts in technology in many areas, particularly in the open section. But the good thing is that they have sections for the schools so that school kids, even in the primary school, can participate in the prizes for that. So this has been a major factor in encouraging innovation among school children and students in Singapore. I'm very happy to know that it's still going strong today. Okay. Right. The second activity I want to highlight is something which we did in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Some of you may remember this. KK had this initiative again to boost creativity and innovation in Singapore. And we thought about how creativity works. It's not only working in science or physics, it's very important in technology, engineering, the arts and culture. So at his initiative, we started this forum on creativity in the arts, science and technology. This is one of the, you can see some of the speakers here being named actually. And I thought it was a very good activity, which I think we did for about 4 or 5 years. And I think it was at the time the only activity involving the arts, science and technology. Now here are some of the speakers. I didn't put the names because here's some of the names. I haven't matched the names of pictures. See? And of course we had scientists and mathematicians, including our own Louis Chen. Of course, Sim Wong Ho was one of the more important ones. It's a matter of regret that he has just passed on, but he made massive contributions to computer technology and the industry in Singapore. Okay. And of course, in the arts and culture, we had Yung Chang, the author of a book called Wild Swans, which tells of her childhood in China and tells it in a very engaging manner. Of course, the others you will know, my friend, good friend Gang Wu, Jack Neo, and Yu Chuni, the pianist from Singapore. I leave it to you to determine who is who, okay? But I'll just mention the two distinguished overseas people. This is Harold Kroto, the awarded Nobel Prize for a chemist discovery of fullerenes, the large molecule. Stephen Spell, mathematician, Hume's methodist. Okay. I think the others, maybe you can determine who they are. Okay. Now, finally, I want to talk about another initiative which I've been really privileged to work with KK. And this is ongoing. Oh, let me just go back to the previous one. Of course, we stopped holding this around about 2003. But I'd be very, very, very happy, and KK would be, if anyone in the audience or anyone would like to revive this conference, because I think it is still good to have a conference which unites the arts, science, and technology. Okay. About 3-4 years ago, KK had this initiative, which I discussed with him, of starting a new World Scientific Journal. And up to that point of time, I don't believe that World Scientific had any journals devoted to education. Now, we're all very concerned with the future of physics. And of course, the future of physics must be very tied up with the future of physics education. Now, if you look at what is available, there are two very good journals of physics education which are in existence. One is the UK, the physics, not the physics teacher. The physics teacher is the US one. The UK one is physics education, okay. Both the physics teacher and physics education are really good journals, very respected. I would say that the physics teacher covers the Americas, well, of course internationally, and physics education covers UK and Europe, okay. So we thought that we could start a journal which was centered within the Asia Pacific. Of course, we still want it to be international, okay. And KK took the bold step of going ahead, working together with Institute of Physics, and started this journal about 3-4 years ago. He is the chairman of editorial advisory board and has really driven and encouraged the progress of this journal. I have to say that I'm honored to be the editor-in-chief, but I actually don't do any work. All the work is done by my colleague Elsie Kwek there, the managing editor, and my colleague Lakshmi there from World Scientific. I'm just sitting there not doing anything actually. But we like to feel that this new journal is playing a major role. Of course, we are looking for articles, and I would solicit any of you interested in any aspect of physics which you think will interest teachers or even clever students. Our audience is, of course, a broad range of physicists, but I think in particular we would like to target physics teachers in the upper secondaries, junior colleges, and maybe even first years in universities and colleges. Because, as you all know, it is very, very, very hard to get people to want to read physics today. Because, as they always tell me, why do you want to do physics? A, it's so hard. 2, I earn so little money. So the people who do physics today are very dedicated, but really we need to promote it. So we're hoping that this journal will help to promote physics in this part of the world, particularly in Southeast Asia and Singapore. Here are the objectives. We target especially teachers in schools and junior colleges, and these are the subjects. Actually, to tell the truth, if you have something that you think will interest physics teachers or even good students, please send us your manuscripts. Okay? We really want to energize physics teaching, and the only way to do this will be to show the existing teachers and the students that physics actually permeates every aspect of daily life in the normal sense, but also is responsible for many remarkable developments in science and technology. And here's a range of the articles that we have got. And I'm happy to say that we see an increasing number of articles coming in. So any of you, please, if you have some idea that you think will interest physics teachers or physics students, please write it up and submit it to us. It doesn't have to be very, very complicated mathematics, okay? As long as it relates to physics and is of interest to teachers and students, we welcome you. Okay, so now I've shown that K.K. Phua, I titled this A Life of Service to Physics because of all these things. But in fact, he has also had a life of service to other areas in technology, okay? In the Young Inventors Award and the Forum on Creativity in the Arts, Science and Technology. So he has influenced technology quite a bit in Singapore. He has also influenced the arts because he drove the Creativity Forum, in which many musicians, visual artists, and writers coming in to tell us how creativity is the same as creativity in the sciences and how that creativity spurred them on to do their creative works. And then finally, without any question, he has massive contributions to education. The Tan Kaki Young Inventors Award, the International Youth Science Forum, GYSS, about which one could give a whole talk, which is just completed this year, and of course a physics educator. So apart from physics, which he has massive contributions, he also has significant contributions in technology and engineering, the arts, and education. So I end my talk here by saying that you have influence far beyond physics, beyond what you may even have realized. And that is due to KK's ever-active mind, which is always thinking of new ways to interest people in physics. So I can only say that we wish you have many, many more fruitful years, and we wish you to have many more interesting, unusual, and weird ideas, because that is what has driven your life to serve physics and all the other areas for the last many years, 80 years. Thank you very much.